This is Pacifica Radio's Letters and Politics. On today's show, we'll be joined by Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor, who has spent a lifetime around government and public policy. He's set to publish a new book that looks at the history of the United States in his lifetime. It's called Coming Up Short, a Memoir of My America. We'll talk about it as well as about public policy in the age of a second Donald Trump presidency and what it may mean for the future of government. Robert Reich joins us next on Letters and Politics. But first, the news.
I'm Scott Babo with these news headlines. An Israeli drone strike in southern Lebanon killed one person today. This after at least 33 Palestinians were killed and many more wounded in Israeli attacks across Gaza since dawn. This according to Palestinian medical sources. Israel expanded ground operations around Gaza City, and residents reported drone strikes and sniper fire targeting those near remaining neighborhoods and Al-Shifa Hospital, while civil defense teams worked to recover bodies. The violence continued despite ongoing negotiations in Washington aimed at halting the conflict. Today, U.S. President Donald Trump is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, pushing Trump's recently unveiled 21-point Gaza peace plan that for the first time outlines how the territory could be governed after the war, though key details remain unclear. The Trump plan would remove Hamas from power and require the militant group to disarm, a step it has rejected. Israel would give up direct security control with an interim international administration of Palestinian technocrats overseeing daily affairs. An international security force, likely from Arab countries, would maintain order and help train Palestinian police. The plan envisions eventual governance by the West Bank-based Palestinian Authority and hints at a long-term framework that could allow Palestinian statehood, though Israel strongly opposes such outcomes. Humanitarian aid would flow freely under neutral oversight, and Palestinians would not be expelled. Arab leaders, including Egypt and the UAE, support the outline, while Hamas and Israel continue to weigh concessions. Democratic and Republican congressional leaders are heading to the White House in a late effort to avoid a government shutdown, but both sides have shown hardly any willingness to budge. If government funding legislation is not passed by Congress and signed by President Donald Trump on Tuesday night, many government offices will be temporarily shuttered and non-exempt federal employees will be furloughed. Republicans are daring Democrats to vote against legislation that would keep government funding mostly at current levels, but Democrats are holding firm and using one of their few points of leverage to demand action on extending health care benefits. Moldova's pro-European Party of Action and Solidarity has secured a decisive parliamentary majority in elections Sunday, strengthening President Maia Sandu's push towards European Union membership. With nearly all ballots counted, the Electoral Commission said the party won just over 50% of the vote, far ahead of the pro-Russian Patriotic Electoral Bloc at 24%. Moldova, which borders war-torn Ukraine, gained independence from the Soviet Union in 1990 and was granted EU candidate status in 2022. It has since faced heavy political pressure from Moscow. Sandu has warned of Russian interference during the campaign, and in the run-up to the vote, police reported evidence of an unprecedented effort by Russia to spread disinformation and buy votes. Opposition leader Igor Dodon prematurely declared victory and urged protests in the capital, though only a small group gathered today. European leaders hailed the outcome as a win for democracy, while the Kremlin complained many Moldovans in Russia were unable to vote. The results gave Sandu's party 55 seats in the 101-member parliament, enough to govern alone. The Social Security Administration will stop issuing paper checks this week, ending an 85-year practice and moving nearly 70 million beneficiaries to electronic payments through direct deposit or prepaid debit cards, in a shift officials say will cut costs and improve security, but which senior advocates and some lawmakers warn could make it harder to access benefits. Farah Siddiqui has more.
Advocates for seniors are warning about the phase-out of paper Social Security checks that starts tomorrow. More than 500,000 Americans will be forced to use direct deposit or prepaid debit cards. Maria Fries with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare says that could be tough for some rural and low-income seniors.
They may or may not read the material that comes in with their checks. They may or may not understand the material, and they may not have any idea that this is coming.
The administration says it'll improve security. Critics argue it risks payment delays for folks without bank accounts and gives a windfall to some payment companies. I'm Farah Siddiqui for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
Efforts to redraw U.S. House districts for partisan gain are spreading across multiple states ahead of next year's election. Republicans in Missouri joined those in Texas today in approving revised maps to boost their party's chances, while several other states, including Indiana, Kansas, Ohio, Utah, Louisiana, Maryland, Florida, California, New York, and Illinois are considering mid-decade redistricting. Missouri's plan could give Republicans a 7th seat, while California Democrats hope to gain 5 more if voters approve. Mid-cycle redistricting is rare but legal in states without restrictions, and the U.S. Supreme Court allows political gerrymandering. Opponents have launched lawsuits and referendum efforts in some states, arguing the maps dilute minority votes or unfairly favor one party. Nationally, Democrats need 3 seats to take control of the House, while Republicans seek to maintain their edge, making these redistricting battles a critical factor in the 2026 midterm elections. President Donald Trump said in a social media post today that he plans to impose a 100% tariff on all movies produced outside the United States, singling out California as a, quote, particularly hard-hit area. Trump did not specify when or how the tariff would take effect. The move would mark the first time the administration has sought to levy a tariff on a service rather than a good. Trump first threatened the measure in May, arguing that foreign tax incentives had lured filmmakers abroad. Hollywood studios have said the proposal would be difficult to enforce and could disrupt production. Most U.S. actors and directors prefer to work domestically. The announcement comes amid other proposed tariffs, including 100% on some branded drugs, 25% on heavy trucks, and 30% on imported furniture. The 22-year-old man charged with killing Charlie Kirk will have a court appearance today. He and his newly appointed legal counsel will decide whether they want a preliminary hearing where the judge will determine if there is enough evidence against him to go forward with a trial. Prosecutors have charged Tyler Robinson with aggravated murder and plan to seek the death penalty. Today's hearing in Provo is open to the public, just a few miles from the Utah Valley University campus where the shooting occurred. I'm Scott Baba for Pacifica Radio.
Good day and welcome to Letters and Politics. I'm Mitch Jeserich. A quick note at the top here for all the radio stations that air this program. Today is the beginning of my second to last week as host of this show. My last day as an employee of my home station, KPFA in Berkeley, is on October 15th, but it looks like we'll still have fresh shows to air through October 16th, so just really one more day, actually. After that, if you need a bridge to fill this hour until you get to your next good thing at your radio station, you do have my consent to air some of our past programs. I will have more to say about all of this in the coming days and about my departure, but please know I am leaving by my own choice and with a deep appreciation for this radio network. It is my community. And they say no one ever really leaves this radio station, and I suspect I'll still be doing special broadcasts here and there. In the coming days, I'll also tell you how we can stay in touch. But now on to today's show, because today I am very happy to welcome back to this radio program Robert Reich for a conversation on the history of the United States over the last 7 decades, about public policy and what is happening to public policy and what is happening to government in the age of a Donald Trump presidency. Robert Reich here in the next couple of days will be publishing a new book. It's called Coming Up Short, a Memoir of My America. Robert Reich is Chancellor's Professor of Public Policy Emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley. He has served in 3 presidential administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and he served as Secretary of Labor under the Bill Clinton administration. Robert Reich, it is a good pleasure, sir, to welcome you back to this program.
Well, thank you very much, Mitch. It's good to be here, and I'm sorry to just hear that you are uh, really voluntarily on your way out. I mean, I've valued for a very, very long time your voice and your perspectives.
Extremely kind of you, sir, for saying that. And I'll still be around. I'm not dying. People keep telling me, congratulating me on my retirement. I'm not quite at that age of retirement, nor am I individually wealthy for an early retirement. So I'll still be around, which is, as you know, sir, things
Well,
change. Things
I, you
change
know,
and
I
times
know
change.
I'm not suggesting you're retiring, but I do have a very particular uh, fragile place in me when anybody talks about retirement because I did officially retire about a year and a half ago from my teaching at Berkeley, and it was difficult. It was difficult. I'm not saying you're retiring, but even changing, what you do that you love to do is very hard.
Well, you've still been busy. I follow your YouTube channel and all the media that you're still doing. So it's not like you've taken to, days on end of fishing.
No, I haven't. And by the way, the book you're referring to, coming up short, actually, its official pub date was in August.
Oh,
And for one glorious week, I don't know how to explain this. It was number one on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list. I shouldn't kind of tout myself and blow my horn. It feels like Donald Trump. And I hope you'll excuse me for doing that.
no, and you'll forgive me. For some reason, I thought I read somewhere October, but I guess not. Hey, your book, it's interesting. It's a memoir, but it's a memoir of the United States and yourself through your lifetime. Um, Doing that, and I'm gonna dive into that with you. And doing that, how do you see in looking at 70 plus years of history of the United States? How do you see this current moment in that history, in context of the history?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is the culmination of at least 50 years I have witnessed and lived of the United States getting off track in terms of where we had been and where we had been after the Second World War. The first 20 years, maybe 30 years after the Second World War, was the largest middle class the world had ever seen. Now, obviously, women and black people were not quite fully given all of the rights they should have been given, but we were on track to improve that and widen opportunity and increase diversity and equity and inclusion, all those words that are no longer even permitted to be said or certainly to be listed by organizations. We were doing, I think, a fairly good job. And then what happened, and I chronicled this in the book because, again, I was there, I watched it. Money started pouring into American politics, mostly from the very wealthy and increasingly from big corporations. Washington, D.C. changed. When I first went there, Mitch, as I say in the book, it was a kind of a backwater. It was it was not it didn't have the fancy restaurants and fancy bistros and five-star hotels and all of the things it now has. But as money poured into Washington, it changed the character of the city. It changed the motivations of many people there. When I first came to Washington in the 60s, it was almost unheard of for members of Congress to retire and become lobbyists. But now, half of members of Congress, half of them, when they retire, they become lobbyists for mostly for the private sector, for big corporations. In other words, power has shifted. And I was there. I, I, I watched it. I was appalled by it. I tried to do what I could, which unfortunately was not enough to warn the public and to scream inside in the halls of power that we shouldn't let power shift like this from the people to big corporations. And I think the end result has been, as I said, Donald Trump. I think Trump is the result of so much of America believing, and this is particularly true of non-college graduates, believing that the game is rigged against them. It is rigged against them, but also believing that Donald Trump would be somehow their savior. And he obviously hasn't been.
Do you think this has led to fascism? And I don't ask that flippantly. I know fascism is a loaded word and is a word we throw out there to smear others. But I ask this because I have heard you, sir, in your own videos, call his administration a fascist state.
Yes, I use the term neo-fascism because I think that it's not exactly the same as we experienced, or at least we fought in World War II in the 1940s, and that emerged on the world stage in the 1930s. But it has some of the same attributes. It really centers on the notion of a strongman who somehow is able to channel the needs and the desires, putatively, of a nation. It depends on military force, on the worshiping of a almost a warrior, not warrior, but a warrior class, and the subjugation of women, the subjugation of minorities, the subjugation of people who are not dominant white male straight people. It has a lot of what we're now experiencing has a lot of the same characteristics of what we saw emerge in the 1930s and we prevailed against, thank goodness, in the 1940s. It's interesting. I don't know if you read the book, Mitch, and I came across Henry Wallace and his writings. In 1944, Henry Wallace, who had been at the time the vice president to Franklin D. Roosevelt, wrote a piece in the New York Times Magazine in which he warned about American fascism. He warned that we had, and he saw as vice president, and he saw even before he was vice president, he saw the beginnings of a dark side to American capitalism. And that was, he termed American fascism. And I quote him in this article in the book because it's extraordinarily prescient, sadly, frighteningly prescient, because so much of what he predicted has come about.
Henry Wallace, it's interesting to me that you bring him up. Of course, he was vice president for a time under FDR. Not when FDR died, though. By that time, we had Harry Truman, who became president. Also was Secretary of Agriculture. He ran for president. As someone who was also a part of government for many years, Professor Reich, and former Secretary of Labor yourself, do you feel a special affinity towards Henry Wallace?
As I say in the book, I actually met Henry Wallace when I was 4 years old. He moved to my town. He was a farmer, and he was a wealthy farmer. He bought the biggest farm in the town I lived in. And one day, my mother came across Henry Wallace in the post office, and they started talking. And he invited her and her little boy, me, to his farm. We sat on his porch, and he lifted me up, and I spent the afternoon on his lap. And I was bored to tears. My mother was transfixed, but that was my kind of that's where Henry Wallace and I crossed paths. I can't say that I was impressed with him at the time when I was four. I didn't talk to him about politics or creeping American fascism. No, but I heard later, and I studied him later. I heard that he was quite an impressive, quite an extraordinary man. And as you said, Franklin D. Roosevelt gave him up as vice president for the haberdasher, Missouri haberdasher named Harry Truman. But that was because the political bosses in the Democratic Party, the urban bosses, didn't feel that they could control Henry Wallace. They thought they could control Truman. and they prevailed on FDR to get rid of Wallace.
Creeping American fascism or neo-fascism or whatever we want to call it, it's interesting to me because during the first Donald Trump presidency, we did a lot of shows on fascism because even myself didn't have a clear sense of what it is, and it actually can't clearly be defined. So it is always sort of this nebulous term that is out there. But we did a lot of shows on it, on the history of it. Personally, I had felt that Donald Trump had fascist tendencies, but I never believed in his first administration that we had a fascist state. And then after his presidency, I even wondered, in moments of self-reflection, did I overdo talking about fascism during that first presidency? Now in the second presidency, I'm like, whoa, I'm reconsidering that again. Maybe I didn't overdo it, looking back at it. And now I look at what's happening at the state. And like I said before, I thought, well, even if Donald Trump is a fascist, we don't have a fascist state. I'm not so sure about that now. What do you think the state of our state of the government is today?
Well, I don't think it's just authoritarian. I think people are confused about the difference between authoritarianism and fascism. And I think, authoritarians believe society needs strong leaders to maintain stability, and they vest, and I'm talking about authoritarians, vest in a dictator the power to maintain social order through the use of force. But fascists view strong leaders as the means of discovering what society needs. I mean, fascists regard the leader as the embodiment of society, the actual voice of the people. So when Donald Trump in 2023 said, I am your justice, I am your retribution, that is very much neo-fascism. The same thing with regard to the galvanizing of popular rage against cultural elites. I mean, authoritarians do stir people up against establishment elites. They use or co-opt those elites in order to gain and maintain power. But fascists actually galvanize public rage at presumed or imagined cultural elites, and they use mass rage to gain and maintain power. They stir up grievances against those elites for supposedly displacing average people. They seek revenge. And in doing this, they create mass parties. They often encourage violence. This, again, is different from your run-of-the-mill authoritarianism. And I could go on. I think it's careless of us as a country to simply say that Donald Trump is an authoritarian. It's worse than that.
Worse than that.
Yes, he's a neo-fascist.
Has he captured the state?
He's on his way to capturing the state. And you have every day more and more evidence that he's trying to. I don't know why he's meeting all of the generals and all of the top military brass at one particular location on Tuesday. But his notion of sending troops into Portland, Oregon, for example, using full force, his words, even though the demonstrations in Oregon against the ICE facility and the ICE, the agents have actually diminished substantially from what they were in July. They were demonstrations in July, but they're far less than what they were. Nevertheless, Portland does give him the opportunity because of Portland's history, because there is a lot of history of demonstration, of people speaking out. Portland, Oregon gives him the opportunity to send in troops and get the kind of response he is hoping for, which is some sort of demonstration, big demonstration, maybe some violence that plays into his plot. And he's doing it. He did it in Memphis. He did it in Los Angeles. He's basically using the military against the people of the United States, which, going back to neo-fascism, which is something that we have not seen before. We saw a little bit at the end of World War I That's true. But we haven't seen this to this degree. And he's also obviously has a kind of a police state in the sense that people who are Americans, I mean, who are here legally, who are Americans, are being arrested. Because why? Because they look like they are Latin Americans, they're Latinos. In fact, I just got word from a friend in Somerville, Massachusetts, uh, who chronicled this. Somebody who was looked Latino, was an American. The ICE agents who surrounded him did decide that he had proof he was an American citizen, but they said it doesn't matter. Let's get him because he fulfills the profile that we're looking for. So they arrested him purely on racial grounds. Well, this is another aspect of neo-fascism. And I could go on and on. I don't need to remind you. You've been reporting on this. I've been watching it. Most people who are listening know exactly what's going on. This is obviously the most disturbing, stressful stress test of American democracy in my lifetime. And I'm 79 years old. Um, and probably your lifetime and the lifetime of most people who are listening. Uh, but I'm actually optimistic, Mitch. I think that in the last few weeks, Trump and his lackeys have made their goals and their processes, their actual methods of achieving their goals so outrageously out in the open um, that I think a lot of people are now saying, even though these people they could be independents or even Republicans, they're saying, no, 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 this is not right. This is really fundamentally, uh, fundamentally contradictory to the Constitution, the rule of law, the ideals of this country, and we're not going to abide by it. We're not going to. I think we're on the verge of a national upheaval. Let's put it that way.
It feels like we're at the point where we're about to find out.
We are about to find out. Yeah, I think there is going to be, um, under the aegis of several groups that have done a wonderful job in terms of the first No King's Day demonstration. There's going to be a second No King's Day demonstration on October 18th. I hope it's going to be even larger, maybe 3 or 4 times larger than the first No King's Day demonstration. It's one way people have of expressing themselves, and it's a decentralized way. I think it would help Trump enormously if we all descended on Washington, because then he could, declare martial law. But if we do it in our own communities and make sure the press knows we're doing it and counts the numbers of us at it, that can be very helpful. There are other things that we can do. I think that what happened in Somerville, Massachusetts, yesterday or the day before, according to my friend, was an example of communities, not officially the city or the state, but the community creating a kind of um, a place that's safety of safety for its people, for people who are accused of being um, undocumented kind of sanctuary communities. That is another thing, a very important step that we all can be taking.
In my years of covering politics, I have found that once there are significant changes, major changes, you never go back to how things were. Now, maybe you can go towards something that was better, but you never quite go back to how things were. Maybe that's just how the universe and life works, generally speaking. But I wonder, as a man of government who cares about government, Robert Reich, in your years in serving government, and you care about government, not for government's sake, but I believe you care for good governance and what government can do in people's lives. when we've seen the decimation of what has happened in government in this past year, the elimination of entire departments, and the elimination of so many jobs, what do you think the future of government is?
Well, here I'm going to sound a little bit to some of your listeners, a little overly optimistic, perhaps, but it's me. This is where I am. It's who I am. I think that we could not have been and remained on the road we were on, Mitch. That is, with ever more money infecting our politics, most of it coming from big corporations, some of it from very, very wealthy people, not reflecting the will of the average working families of America, and also more and more inequality. That is, the gap between the rich and the poor getting ridiculously out of proportion. CEO pay moving from 20 times the average worker when I was first looking at this in the 1960s and 70s to now 300 times the typical worker. And on and on. That road that we were on, it was unsustainable. And if you add in other unsustainable aspects of it, for example, global climate change and our support for international authoritarians like Netanyahu, and the growth of authoritarians around the world like Putin, well, I think we could not have stayed on that road. And so that inevitably there was going to be an explosion, a break. I think I wished that, if in terms of my values, that explosion, that break, that turning point had happened under somebody who really understood democracy and valued the rule of law and valued social justice. It's happened under Trump. But I think the reaction will be huge. Many people I come across around the country, and I travel quite a lot across America, say to me things like, I never knew what democracy really meant until now. Or somebody else said to me the other day, the rule of law was kind of an abstraction to me. Now I really get it. I know what it is. It's when values are lost, when things are lost, that people begin to appreciate them. And so I believe that we are on the edge of a huge counter reaction to Trump, to what's happened over the last 30, 40 years in terms of widening inequality and money in politics, big money in politics, and the kind of legalized bribery that has made our government almost unrecognizable. And I think that we're going to see something very different. Now, Mitch, you said a moment ago that we tend to return to where we were before, that we have changes, but they're changes around you didn't say it in these words, but I think I gathered from what you say, changes around a mean. But after Nixon, there really were pretty dramatic legal changes. They were whittled back, it's true, and eventually by the Supreme Court. But there were pretty important dramatic changes in reaction to the excesses of Richard Nixon. And if you go back even further in American history, go back to the first Gilded Age of widening inequality, of real corruption, starting in 1890 through about 1920. That Gilded Age is being replicated now. I call this the second Gilded Age. That first Gilded Age, the reaction to that first Gilded Age was very, very firm and large. The public reacted. And that's where we got the first progressive era in terms of reforms that started under Teddy Roosevelt and continued under his fifth cousin, FDR. Well, will this second Gilded Age have a reaction like, shall we say, the second progressive era? I like to think so. Now, again, Mitch, many of your viewers may think that I'm being overly optimistic, that I'm seeing silver linings on this dark cloud, but I'm hopeful. I don't want to be anything other than hopeful.
Well, I'm reminded of a recent quote. I think it was the historian John Meacham who said a Donald Trump presidency makes an AOC presidency more likely or possible, something to that extent. That when the pendulum goes one direction, it can equally go in the other direction.
Well, I think an AOC presidency is possible. Uh, I spent a lot of my time with young people, my colleagues at the nonprofit I co-founded, Inequality Media, Civic Action, and my students, who I still see. And those young people, when I talk about, for example, an AOC presidency, they get very excited. We have people in New York who are very, very committed to Mamdani. I mean, who, my granddaughter is going door to door, knocking doors for Mamdani. This is, I think, the future of the Democratic Party if the party understands its future.
Robert Reich, as we move to wrap up here, your memoir, the book's called Coming Up Short, A Memoir of My America. This paragraph stood out to me. I love America and am proud of much that this nation has accomplished over my lifetime. I remain doggedly hopeful about the long-term future. But undeniably, we and much of the world now face a brutal set of crises, headed by the decline of democracy and the deterioration of the rule of law. My father and his greatest generation won the Second World War and created the most powerful economy and strongest democracy the world had ever seen, populated by the largest and most prosperous middle class in history. My boomer generation and I then failed to create the decent, sustainable, and just society that was within our grasp. In this regard, I'm sorry to say, we all came up short. Do you feel your generation has failed? You said in this regard, so maybe not ever. Tell me more about that.
I don't. I mean, it's hard to, and I don't mean to be too broadly brushed, emit too much of a generalization about an entire generation. But I knew and have known many of the leaders, so-called, of my generation. I mean, I went to law school with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, who was then Hillary Rodham, and Clarence Thomas. We were all in the same class. And I've known many others. I mean, I was born the same year as Donald Trump and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton. And I think our leaders, that is, the leaders of our generation, accomplished some very important things. But in terms of the legacy that was given us by our parents who endured the Depression, who won the Second World War, who bequeathed the largest middle class the world had ever seen, and the possibilities of a much, much stronger democracy, we did come up short. And Mitch, I should warn readers or anybody who does want to become a reader of this book that there is a double entendre in the title. I mean, I'm very short. But because I have always been very short, I was bullied when I was a little kid, 4, 5, 6 years old, and the theme of bullying, of being bullied, is very central to the book. It's very central to holding on to democracy and the rule of law in terms of fighting bullies. And fighting bullies is the subtext of everything I have written in this book. We have to fight the bullies. We've got to fight for a democracy, a rule of law, and social justice. Nothing else is worth really fighting for if we don't get those right.
Robert Reich has been our guest again. His latest book, now out, it's called Coming Up Short, A Memoir of My America. Robert Reich, I do thank you dearly for taking this time to talk to us today.
Well, Mitch, I thank you too, and I look forward to talking to you and seeing you again, and good luck to you, whatever you decide to do. I just want to thank you for all of the incredibly thoughtful and insightful discussions you have had with all of us.
That's extremely kind of you, sir. Thank you, and be well.
Thank you.
And you are listening to Letters and Politics. I am Mitch Jeserich. It's very nice of Robert Reich to say, he's just a real gentleman. I think he was just being nice. This is, as I said, Letters and Politics, and I am coming to you here at the beginning of the second week of our fall fund drive, a very important fund drive for our stations, KPFA in Berkeley, KFCF in Fresno, and KPFK in Los Angeles. This is the time of year I come to you seeking a financial contribution to keep this historic radio station on the air during, I think as you heard in that conversation, a very critical time to have this radio station on the air and to have these airwaves open to public and the different ideas, and to have, I would really stress this, to have a radio station that is not fearful of what it says on air. Because we are listener supported, we do not fear advertisers pulling their funds. Because we are listener supported, we do not fear philanthropic organizations taking their funds away because of our coverage of Palestine, obviously more recently Gaza. But this radio station has been covering Palestine in its entirety for decades, with consequences, for sure. But we have never been fearful, nor have we ever been told from some entity within this radio station of tamper down on what you say about Palestine and Israel. Never. There have been consequences, but they haven't been internal ones. Not that I'm at least aware of. I've never seen it. We are not fearful. We're not even fearful of the administration coming after our broadcasting license, which actually could happen and perhaps will happen, claiming that this is not an educational broadcaster in which our license is based on. We're not fearful because we're supported by listeners. Our biggest existential threat is when we lose the support of our community, a community I feel very connected to and that I will remain to be a part of even after I step down as host of this radio program. So today I'm coming to you asking you for your financial support to this radio station. And I'm asking for a contribution that you can afford, that's according to your means, and that you feel good about as you go upon your day, knowing that you did your part, knowing that this is here because of you, and also knowing, and I know we have lots of friends out there, and you may be one of them, who may not be in a position to make that contribution right now. And I don't want you to feel bad about that. I don't want you to worry about that. I don't want you to think twice about it. Just understand, when I am on air, we cast out a large net, and I got to really urge the folks who have yet to donate to do so, because it's the only way we're going to keep this radio station on the air, right? So, and I can't differentiate. I can't talk to you and then them differently, right? We just got to do it all together. But if you are that person who is in a situation that perhaps it's not a good idea for you right now to make that contribution, don't do it. We don't want it. We're glad you're here. I promise you, there's nothing worse in this world than a lonely radio broadcaster. And believe me when I tell you, I know what that feels like. So I'm glad you're there. And for our friends that can do it, recognize this is a public resource available to everyone, regardless of their ability to make a contribution. You're not buying something. You're supporting something. If this was a streaming online service, if you couldn't pay each month, you get cut off. Not here. Not ever. But that's only because people took an active role, a deliberate role, and supporting the things they want in their community. And I'm asking you to do that right now with a contribution that you can do. It could be $25, $50, $75. It could be $500. You can make it a challenge of $1,000, and we could use it in another show to try to raise even additional money. What you can do without really having to look at your bank account to see that you can do it. We do have a thank you gift. And again, it's a thank you gift. You can get this much cheaper somewhere else. You're not buying it. But if you can afford a $150 contribution, Robert Reich's new book, Coming Up Short, a Memoir of My America, which is basically a history of the United States in his lifetime. So fascinating that he sat on the lap of Henry Wallace. Interesting stories you don't always anticipate. That book is available for a contribution of $150. We're also offering Letters and Politics. We have two curated online collections that we'll send you links to: the Letters and Politics American History Collection and the Letters and Politics Ancient History Collection, something we've done a lot over the years, and I think shows that still stand. They're still valid. They're still relevant, I hope. Each of those you can get. We'll send you the link. You'll have access to it online for a contribution of $100. The reality, again, is because I am a public broadcaster and I'll always be a public broadcaster at heart, the reality is that you can also get both of those collections online. So if you're listening and you can't afford a contribution, you could just do a web search. It'll come up. Just don't tell my boss that's how you found it. The number to make that contribution for KPFA listeners in the San Francisco Bay Area, and this is also true for KFCF listeners in the Central Valley, is 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732. And online at kpfa.org. There you can actually just go on and look at all the thank you gifts that we're offering, kpfa.org. For our friends in Southern California, our friends in Los Angeles and throughout the Southern California region listening to KPFK, the number you call is 818-985-5735. 818-985-5735. And online at kpfk.org. We do have a $1,500 challenge as I speak to you right now, so it's quite a bit. But if we can make it, that'll get us at $3,000. It's important to make each hourly goal, or to try to get as close as we can, because that will put us in position at the end of this drive next week of making our overall goal. This is how we fund this radio station. This is how this radio station exists. It's a community, and it takes a community to support a community radio station. This $1,500 challenge is from Denise in Oakland. And if we can make it, we will double that $1,500 to $3,000. That could be 15 people pledging $100. That can be 30 people pledging $50. That could be 60 people pledging $25. Again, for KPFA listeners and KFCF listeners, that phone number is 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. In Southern California, it's 818-985-5735. 818-985-5735, and online at kpfk.org. I do need to be clear, as I do ask you for your support, and I am earnestly and sincerely asking you for your support, and I do it as I also have to let you know that I'm stepping down as host of this radio program here in a couple of weeks. It's been a great pleasure to be here every day with you, going through these stories. I'm not leaving because I'm disgruntled. I'm not being pushed out. I love this radio station. I always will. I don't think there's any other place that would have given somebody like me the opportunities that it has given. I am privileged enough to say, and I will recognize not everyone believes this and has experienced this. And, we each have our own experiences in life, and I respect that. But for me, it's hard. It's hard when you have a place and everyone has different opinions of what things should be and interest and limited resources. It's always complicated. It's not that there's good guys and bad guys. It's life's complicated, and life's always complicated. But I am privileged enough to be able to say that I feel as though I have been treated very well by this radio station, and I'll remain a part of it. This is my community. You are my community. I'll still be around. I'm open to doing, and they've been, at least there seems to be a desire out there to do some special broadcasts sometimes and stuff like that. I'm sure you'll even hear me asking for money again, because we are a public broadcaster. That's what we do. 1-800-439-5732. That's the phone number for KPFA and KFCF. 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. Los Angeles and Southern California, listening to KPFK. The number is 818-985-5735. 818-985-5735 and online at kpfk.org. So I am stepping away, and I will be working on my own independent storytelling projects, is sort of the best way I could put it. And what will that be? Who knows? I don't have a hard, concrete answer for you. I have a couple of things, but I don't have a hard, concrete answer, because I have learned in life things never work out and go the way we plan them to, or the way we hope them to. We hope they do. What I'm trying to do is just sort of go with the flow of how things and see where they will go, and go on the ride with it. Maybe I've read too much Chuang-Tzu. Remember our shows about Thomas Merton, the Catholic monk who translated the Taoist texts of Chuang-Tzu? That was one of my favorite shows. You just go with it and see where it goes. And if you're able to incorporate that into your life, you may find that you go a little bit easier. Storytelling is something that is important to me. And I've started a podcast as a way to be able to stay in touch with people. It's called Letters from Mitch. Feels ostentatious to put my name in there. And I played with some other names, and the name could very well change. Played with Storytime, with Mitch Jeserich. Again, it felt weird. It feels weird to use my name in that. I've thought about Wandering. I've heard someone, Chris Lee, who actually does work here at KPFA, and a good friend of mine, she described my show once to somebody. It's basically whatever Mitch wants to do. It's kind of true. And also what Deanna Martinez wants to do. She is the producer, and we do respect that. And she is she is fantastic at what she does. And I'm very interested in the storytelling and doing the readings that we have done here, and telling. We'll still do interviews, but there may be a refocus. And so there is this podcast. I end up going with Letters from Mitch, and I end up using my name because it actually is something that is from me. Where do I come up with this letters? Let me give you the number again to make that contribution for KPFA and KFCF listeners, 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. In Southern California, listening to KPFK in Los Angeles, number is 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, and online at kpfk.org. We are $235 towards that $1,500 challenge. We still have 6 minutes for me to be able to speak to you, but after that, we have another 5 to 10 minutes, which you get your call in. KPFA and KFCF listeners, 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. Southern California, 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, and online at kpfk.org. So where does the name Letters and Politics come from? You'll notice that there's always this theme of the show with letters in it. We have Letters on Politics. Before that, it was Letters to Washington. And before that, it was called Letters from Washington. And the show began back as a pilot project in 2009 to cover the first 100 days of the Obama presidency back in 2009. And I was influenced to call it Letters from Washington because I was heavily influenced by the great BBC broadcaster Alistair Cooke. Most of us know Alistair Cooke for his role back in the day on Masterpiece Theater when he would introduce whatever was coming up on PBS's Masterpiece Theater. And I'd watch just to watch Alistair Cooke because I just loved his presence and the way he spoke. But he was also famous back home where he was from in England and Great Britain, throughout Great Britain, for his work with the BBC, where he did a daily 5-minute segment called Letters from America. And it was wildly popular. And it was just him giving a 5-minute audio essay. And I love that term, letters. Now, obviously, I couldn't say Letters from America, and I couldn't rip them off completely. But when I first started this pilot project, which was the first show I was doing myself that I was the host of and got to decide the name, I did Letters from Washington. And that's while I was in Washington. Then when I came back home to the Bay Area, it's like, well, I can't say Letters from Washington anymore. Well, let's make it Letters to Washington, as though we were writing letters to our congressional members and president. We went that for a while, but I was never that comfortable with it because it just sounded, this isn't a negative thing. But it wasn't quite where I was. It sounded like we were the activist. And I've always been a reporter who has activists on. And I always liked the name of the bookstore, Politics and Prose. I knew I couldn't, that's in D.C. as well, and I knew I couldn't rip off that name, so eventually I just came up with Letters and Politics. And that became the name. But now this next venture with this podcast, you also find me on Substack, and I have a few things up there now. They're just audio essays, nothing more. We're going to try to form them into letters to you, in which there will be vehicles for storytelling. So that's where we're at now. The truest thing I could say of what I'm doing now is letters from moi, letters from Mitch, letters from me. And again, we can also stay in touch over a Substack account, which I have just created. And we're going to stay in touch right here at KPFA and KPFK, as long as we can raise the funds to keep this historic station on the air in this moment, as Robert Reich laid out, is critically important in our time. This is not the time to lose this radio station. And you're not losing me from this radio station. I'm just sort of transforming my role. The number again for KPFA listeners is 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732. And online at kpfa.org. In Southern California, KPFK in Los Angeles, 818-985-5735. 818-985-5735. And online at kpfk.org. We are now $863 towards that $1,500 challenge from Denise in Oakland. We have a chance of making it, but we need another 700 or 600, and I don't know, it's hard to do math when they're not even numbers. Let's just say another $650. We could make this. That's 7 people donating $100. It's 4 people donating, or it's 14 people donating $50. Whatever you can afford. We are offering Robert Reich's book for a pledge of $150. The number for KPFA listeners, 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. In Southern California, for KPFK, 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735. Now I am down to my final 30 seconds here until I have to let it go to the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. As I speak to you now, I had a little bit more money just come in. We are now $483 away from this challenge. We have 10 minutes to make it into the next hour. 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732. And online at kpfa.org. Thank you.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA Berkeley, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online at kpfa.org.